Welcome, everybody, to the Unboxed Pod, short for the Microsoft Unboxed website, where I'm your host, Kareem Anderson, and I'm joined by,
David Allen. Hope everybody's doing well out there. We're here for another unboxed round of fun.
yeah, where we come together and we talk about all things Microsoft in or happening around the world of Microsoft. Um, so, again, topics can range from just specifically Microsoft things, things like Copilot, Windows, Office, to their competitors, court cases, developments, real estate, anything that happens to tie into the world of Microsoft. We'll try and cover it. So if you're a fan of technology, you're a fan of Microsoft, you're a fan of its competitors, we hopefully will have something for you. Speaking of which, let's get through our rundown real quick, just so people kind of can have a feel of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be going over let me sure I got it. Talking about Teams being separated from Office. Finally, this is big. This is huge. This is brought on by the UK. I think Slack had a victory dance recently. So we'll be talking about how that how that came to be, and what that could mean for the future of the product. We're going to be talking about Microsoft looking to bring its AI over to Xbox in the way of chat support, and what that means and why I'm not a fan of it. We're going to be talking about Apple fans getting ready for WWDC, and whether or not we'll be hearing anything about the Vision Pro, or if it's going to be all AI like it should have been last year. We're going to be talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365, adding some features. So if you're paying for it, you're going to be getting some stuff as far as access to ChatGPT 4 Turbo and unlimited conversations as part of the package. Then we're going to be moving on to Google potentially figuring out a way to charge for its generative search experience. We see that Microsoft's doing one thing. We'll see how Google potentially could do something similar. Then we're going to end this whole conversation podcast with some brief uh, prognostications about the Snapdragon X-Elite. Apparently, we had some friends in the business go and kind of test it out, play around with it, and the overall consensus is that it is legit. Like, this may be the year of Windows on ARM, as all of the Linux people might be raising their fist, saying, "Hey, we've been saying this for over 20 years now. You guys can't steal it." We might be saying this is the year of Windows on ARM. With that being said, let's get into what's going on with Teams being separated from Office. I know that you wanted to put this on the docket.
Yep, I think, like you said in the headline rundown, this is a big deal and it has finally happened. It was all because of the EU, and Microsoft has decided to just go ahead and do it globally, perhaps just to ward off any other lawsuits making anybody else mad. So you can now get Teams separate from the Office 365 suite. For those that have been in the dark, if you wanted to use Teams in the past, the business version of Teams, let's not confuse that with the consumer version. If you wanted to use the business version of Teams for your organization, you had to buy into the entire Office suite. The EU says, nope, that's anti competitive. So, Microsoft says, okay, we'll just pull Teams out of Office 365. You can now get Teams separately, and I have the price here. Just Teams is anywhere from $5.25 a month, and if you get the bundled options, it's $7.75 to $54.75, depending on, of course, what Office 365 tier you get. Now, I want to add one comment to this. I understand the whys. I understand, that the EU thinks, well, you're forcing people to buy into the bundles. I get that idea. But to me, and this is somewhat personal, Teams will lack a lot of functionality without the Office integration. For those that just want basic instant messages, basic audio, video chat, that may be the answer. Kind of like let's call it the professional version of Skype, for a lack of a better way to put it. For those that are, looking at that, that's the answer. But if you're looking some of the other functions, Planner and whatnot, it does link you back to Office 365 as part of the integration. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I have a slightly different opinion on that. I agree with what you're saying that you could lose the convenience of the functionality. I think
Right?
Microsoft's done a pretty good job of exporting a lot of their experiences to the web. I think what this is going to do is just be more convoluted and introduce more ads, essentially, more opportunities for Microsoft to pitch combining the two products. It's in the same way that like using Spotify as a replacement for Groove. There are end arounds in the Windows operating system that point you towards Spotify. Like, hey, if you want to do this, go download Spotify. And I think that's what's going to happen for a lot of people. And again, this started in the EU, but this will be globally. I think Microsoft, uh, its servicing and pricing is going to be different. I think they're going to raise the price for certain things. They're also going to incentivize buying both at the same time, probably no different than kind of when they said it was bundled. I think what's going to end up happening now is that they're going to have a fight, probably go down the line, about how easy it is to integrate Slack into Office products. That is the way. If I were a cynical businessman, I'd say, okay, EU, you finally you twisted my arm enough to almost broke it. Here, fine, they're separated, but it's going to be easier to integrate Teams. It just happens to be harder to integrate Slack. Hey, we're following the law. We're doing what you asked. It's just complicated. We can't help it that people find integrating with Teams so much easier. How are we supposed to know? I think that's what's going to be Slack's next big fight. So while they are popping champagne probably for the week, I'm sure they have lawyers and they have print copiers, and everyone going through all of Microsoft's plans for its next legal battle as far as dealing with something like that. But with that being said, we always tout competition. We said it during the Activision thing, and I want to be as fair as possible and as even as possible. So here, kudos to the EU for forcing Microsoft to do something more competitive. And again, maybe this will eventually lead to better pricing or at least longer trial periods for businesses to play around with Slack and force them to integrate features faster and better. So fingers crossed on this positivity.
It could also lead to, in the end, it could also have the reverse effect, kind of like what you were mentioning. For those people that buy Teams individually, okay, they use it. Okay, Teams is nice. Now, if we had the rest of it, it would be even nicer. So it could go back the other way. I think, this EU thing is a matter of choice. I think, they want businesses to have the choice. And I completely agree that, it would only be right for Microsoft to start dropping ads in the single subscriptions of Teams. But I think in a roundabout way, it may come back in Microsoft's favor for those that start out with just Teams and end up with the whole thing just to finish out the whole integration process, which, as we discussed last week, I'm a little bit of an integration guy, so I kind of look at things that way. I'm not a fan of separating things out and having different products serve different purposes. I kind of like having a cohesive workflow every day. Maybe that's just me.
No, I agree. Enough with that. We're going to move on to Microsoft working on an AI-powered Xbox support agent. People might wonder, what does that mean? Well, based on reporting and kind of the rumors, Microsoft is looking to bring its AI, well, basically surface all of its support pages in a more interactive experience. That's what I've kind of whittled it down to. They're looking, on the surface of it, they're looking to have an AI-powered Xbox support agent that might help gamers get through issues that they're facing with the consoles. So, imagine if you use Office or if you use Google Docs or anything like that, the help section at the top of each of those applications or if you're like maybe Google Ads, or you're some kind of software that has a help section, and that help section generally leads to support pages that kind of list them like, okay, here's the next steps, and whatever it is you're searching for. So if you're trying to say, hey, how do I combine cells, and using Excel for an example, and you go to that help section, you type in combine cells, it'll bring up a support page that will, Microsoft has written years ago on how to combine Excel cells. And it looks like this AI powered bot, because they throw AI in front of everything, will do that essentially. This is being reported by The Verge. I believe Microsoft had a quote saying, in detail about the support agent, saying, "We are testing an Xbox support virtual agent, an internal prototype of an animated character that can query Xbox support topics with voice over text," says Hyen Zhang, the general manager of gaming AI at Xbox, in a statement to The Verge. The prototype makes it easier and quicker for players to get help with support topics using natural language, taking information from existing Xbox support pages. Now, with that being said, we've all kind of experienced this in some kind of capacity on our PCs or on your phone, things like that, which are two very distinct devices. One you could speak into, you're encouraged to, and the other one you're encouraged to type into. The Xbox, you're not really encouraged to have either of those interactions really on the device. You have a controller that has 11 buttons that are mapped to a specific way of navigating the OS. I'm interested in seeing how, when they say natural language, how they're going to implement that. Maybe people with headsets can speak into it. I always found it difficult to type with the included controller, and if you're not on PC, you don't have the keyboard. So I do wonder how they implement this. Other details that we know, for those of you thinking Xbox AI Cortana, it's not going to be Cortana. They're not bringing her back, at least as far as we know so far. We don't know what this AI agent is going to look like. It's supposed to be some kind of animated character. I don't know if it's going to be like Clippy Redux. Maybe they'll have Master Chief, or I forget the guy's name from Gears of War. Maybe one of those guys will come walking onto the screen and say, "Hey, look over here, click on that button to get some help." But there is optimism and hope that this will evolve into a potential AI co-pilot experience for gaming specifically, not just support pages, which will essentially have, if you're in game, maybe developers can create their own AI bot that will walk you through levels if you're having trouble, can show you, if you are an achievement junkie, where the next achievements might be. They can have a map that kind of shows you that. If you type in like, set me up a plan to find all achievements, things like that. That is the goal, I think, at the end of the day, for this Xbox AI Copilot platform. The reason why I said at the top that I'm not a fan of this is that because this reminds me a lot of what Google does is where they point people to support pages, and when it's something you really need to have someone talk you through or to help you comprehend or understand, it's always nice to have a person. I feel like Microsoft is taking that position away, because at the end of the day, at this point, there's still a number you can call to speak with somebody in customer support. I feel like they're going to vary that even further, saying, "Hey, just use our chatbot," like that. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never had a great experience with chatbots. They are very annoying, untimely, dismissive. With that being said, what are your thoughts on this?
We're in the same boat on that one, my friend. I used and I'm not going to name the business, but I've used two businesses this week that
it was Google. Just say it.
that have online chat, and I had very quickly noticed, because we do this for a living and we know the cues to look forward to, that those chat items had now turned into an AI style bot. And what I needed at both businesses was very basic, and the bot was unable to give me those answers, so I had to start looking for a way to get a hold of a human. And both of these businesses are places that I do business with regularly. I had the phone number in my phone, but I'm like, let me see how hard this number is to get to now that they have instituted this bot that is now in place. The number took me another 15, 20 minutes to reach a human. And I am in full agreement with you. I don't think this is the right way to go because gaming is a little different. Gaming is when the kid is playing the game for the most part. The kid goes and gets the parent. The parent is usually busy doing something, or called away from something. And the parent is not going to stick through a bot. The parent just wants it fixed so their kid can play and move on. I get what Microsoft is trying to do. You've got this thing called AI Copilot that's sprinkled everywhere. And maybe for some basic things like credit card billing, changing of passwords, stuff like that, maybe that works. But I agree with you. I think we've got to keep the human element for Xbox somewhere
Yeah.
near the forefront for it to work.
And to be clear, like I appreciate them bringing,
Yes.
surfacing all of these support pages because again, the flow would be working your Xbox, or something breaks on your Xbox, you're not working properly, then you're moving on to your computer, laptop, um, or phone or whatnot, whatever you're gaming on, to then look for those same support pages. You have to, kind of search it. I appreciate them condensing the workflow to the one device so that you can say, hey, if my audio is broken, I can go to this section. I don't think they should call it AI because it's not. It's just basically combining a way for the machine to surface the pages for you, just like we don't call the search in Office AI, at least not yet. It's just, it's nice that they're doing that, but I think they should be careful with just ubiquitously throwing AI on everything because that's not what it is. But I do like the idea of developers being able to create bots or AI things that basically work alongside the game that you're playing to then help you if needed. So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm gonna be optimistic about. I'm gonna stop trying to be negative about this exact topic, but bring back humans because we want to talk to them, surprisingly or not. Our next topic is WWDC. I know this is a Microsoft podcast, and you're scratching your head, but go ahead and tell people why we're interested in WWDC, or why
Well,
other people might be.
I'm interested in it for one reason, and I think the rest of our Microsoft fans may be. So, long story short, and we'll keep this brief. Apple fans, get ready for WWDC 24. It is coming June 10th through the 14th. You can go ahead and get registered up on their developer pages. And when you get registered on the developer website, Apple says the online sessions will be free for those that are registered developers, so you can jump in there and check out what they're up to. Now, the reason I bring this up, for most Microsoft fans out there, a lot of us use Android phones because you get the integration with PhoneLink and a few other things with your Android phone. And we know that there's been talk of Apple is finally joining the rest of the crowd with RCS for text messaging, for the text messaging standard. The reason I wanted to bring this headline up is the rumors are pretty hot that Apple has said it's coming this year, that when iOS 18 is released here at WWDC for the developers to get to work for a release this fall, that the RCS text messaging may be a part of that. So I know there'll be a lot of Microsoft folks out there that are excited to see what Apple's going to do between RCS and iMessage. Do they leave iMessage in the fold? And if you've got an iPhone, it goes to iMessage. If you've got RCS on a Google phone, it goes to RCS. How are they going to do this? I think that's really something big that everybody's looking forward to. And there's also talk of what are they going to do with Google? What are they going to do with AI? We talked about it last week that Apple may be leaning on Gemini a little bit for their AI efforts, maybe instead of completely and totally building their own, because Google does pay to be the primary search engine on Apple devices. So it's going to be interesting to see what they put out for AI as well and how they compete, how it integrates, because AI is kind of like the chat bot we were just talking about. It doesn't do very well without an integration. So how do they integrate that into the ecosystem? And perhaps they'll be showing developers how to do that. So this may be what is kicking off, for lack of a better term, Apple AI, whether it be something they build, something they integrate, or a combination of the two. So I think even if you're not an Apple fan, if you're a Microsoft fan, there are still things here to pay attention to. So that June 10th through the 14th.
Yeah, what you didn't mention was the Apple Vision Pro. I want to see how they're going to talk themselves out of this little corner, because we've seen it
Yeah.
how Microsoft basically did, and what they did was they kept trying to develop apps for it, experiences for it. It didn't work. Then they came with the version 2, because most of their complaints at the time for the HoloLens was the field of view. It wasn't the applications necessarily, because Microsoft showed off a ton, which we find interesting as a comparison to the Vision Pro, which showed off one particular lifestyle experience. Microsoft had a varied one. They were using Skype to kind of walk people through plumbing repairs or jet engine repairs, down to playing Minecraft on a desk. They had a wide variety. So the apps weren't the issue necessarily. It was more about the field of view. Everyone kept complaining about that. So they worked on it, they tweaked it, they kept addressing it in different developers conferences, things like that. Either way, it still never caught up. But I do want to know, since the hardware just came out in January, essentially, they're not going to have a version 2. Maybe they might tease some ideas or concepts for version 2. But are they going to introduce new ways and new lifestyle experiences for the apps that they hope developers make for this thing? Now that we've had everyone kind of have their reviews, have their experiences with it, have long-term reviews, as long as 3 months grants you. I do want to know how they're gonna talk about that, and if they even are. Maybe to your point, maybe they just say, hey, you know what? The Apple Vision Pro is out there. Our new focus is AI. And with that being said, they've got, since when's their announcement? They do announce things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the start date of when they started a project. But they've had roughly, we'll give them, for being generous, 6 months to work with Google to introduce new AI features, tailored AI features for Apple. What will those be, and how do they differentiate between that and Google? And is there already kind of cross compatibility? Like, is part of the deal, like, hey, we'll let you'll get Gemini, but we want access to some timely developments down the road. So if you create something, we want to be able to reverse engineer it and bring it over to Android. And the last thing I want to know is, when will the DOJ or the FTC step in to say, hey, you know what, Google, you now control 100% of the smartphone market when it comes to AI and search? Because the idea was going to be that, with mapping, Apple created their own thing. With search, they lean on Google, which is fair, because, they should be able to create their own, but, Google has that. But now with AI, it's going to be the exact same thing. Like, they will have Gemini on all Android phones in all countries, mostly. China has its own thing. And then it will have search as well. And it'll have it on iOS and Android devices. That's 100% of the market for AI. So does someone come in and step in and say, hey, you know what, Apple, you need to really work on your own. Like, you can't keep defaulting to Google, because then Google just owns all of the smartphone market. Or maybe I'm just being conspiratorial. Maybe I'm just jealous because Windows Phone is not around anymore. But who knows? We're going to move on. Unless you have some lasting thoughts, we're going to move on to our next topic.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think eventually the DOJ gets another shot at another tech giant out there if this happens the way we envision it, because basically that gives, like you said, it gives Google 100% control, and I don't think the DOJ is going to stand for 100% control right now of anything. I mean, they've got their ever since the Activision Blizzard deal, they've got their radar up. They're on full power, and I think they're looking to clean things up.
Correct. Our next topic is going to be Copilot. Microsoft is updating it for those who pay for it. Essentially, Copilot for Microsoft 365 adds priority GPT-4 Turbo access and unlimited conversations in the latest update for, again, those people who pay for priority versions of it. They announced, I think it was earlier this week, I want to say maybe on the second or third, that the paid version of the AI assistant will, for commercial customers, be getting OpenAI's GPT-4 Turbo model, which provides faster and more accurate responses for both web and work-related queries. I don't know why all of them don't, but hey, you get what you pay for, as my grandma used to say. In the web context, Copilot users get the power of the latest foundation models grounded in the latest public information from the web, said Jared Sparto, who's the corporate vice president AI at work. The work context lets you get even further by grounding in your own work data. That's your calendars, emails, chats, documents, meetings, contacts, and more, so you can get contextually accurate responses, the exec also added. With Microsoft Copilot 365, Microsoft has also removed the limits on the number and the length of responses that the AI assistant can provide. I think now, or currently, at least casual customers, consumer commercial customers, there's an option to start a new conversation after a certain period. It looks like you won't have to do that. You'll be able to just keep going on and on with further context for these things as well. I believe this will start in May, if I'm not mistaken. So next month you'll be getting this new update. They also get priority. Commercial customers will also get priority access to Microsoft Designer, as well as with expanded images and more capabilities from the Dolly Power Tool. And they'll be able to generate more requests. I think they get 100 more than we currently get. I think we get 80, so they get 180 or something close to that. Copilot for Microsoft 365 is currently $30 a month, and I don't think they're going to raise the price when they add these new features on top of the Microsoft 365 subscription. And this is going back to our discussion with Teams, like, we're separating it. Now you're going to be paying a Teams price on top of a Microsoft price instead of having it bundled, but we'll see if there's any kind of workarounds for commercial admins who have been customers for Microsoft for some time. But anyway, with that being said, what are your thoughts on the Chat GPT-4 Turbo access and unlimited conversations only going to people who pay $30 in addition to
I think that's the path we're going to go down. And we have mentioned this before. AI is expensive to operate. It's. I believe I saw something this week that the queries were 7-to-1 right now of the amount of horsepower it takes to execute an AI query versus what it takes to execute just a traditional search with basic text like we've always done. So I think you're going to start seeing more tiers as time goes on, and we start seeing more of these specialized language models come out. You've got one for security, you've got one for developers, and I think you're going to see more and more of it. The only question is, does it become something like consumers have dealt with for several years and companies have questioned? Will companies get tired of the subscription model? Payments every month, payments, subscribe here, subscribe there, subscribe here, and the per user, setup of, it's okay now that one user is $30, $50, whatever, it comes out to be in the end. But when you need 10 users, it's all about money. These servers have got to be paid for, the GPUs making the queries have got to be paid for. And I think you're going to see pushing like this until companies push back, whether it's Microsoft or Google or somebody else, until companies push back and say, okay, that's enough. We've had enough of these subscriptions of AI. This is what we want. And then we may see the industry retailer some packaging and some pricing to more of what businesses want. But for right now, it's the hot topic. It's what's expensive. Businesses are going to push that model, and they're going to push that subscription, and they're going to push that dollar as far as they can.
Speaking of which, segue.
Yep, good one
Um,
there.
yeah, that was perfect. We have Google figuring out or potentially figuring out a way to charge for its search generative experience. That was something you brought into the conversation.
Well, here's what we've got, folks. According to a report from the Financial Times, Google is getting ready to, or considering, let me rephrase that, is considering charging for their AI search. Now, let me explain what that is. If, and most of you have searched through Google, if you search through Google now and say you're searching how to hook up my Xbox, you will get the generative result above the traditional search results. They're saying, okay, we may start charging for these generative results. And in fact, Google is testing this already in certain markets. And they're looking at a Google One plus AI subscription for $19.95 a month. Now, that does include the 2 terabyte of cloud storage, and it does get you access to Gemini and AI across the Google Workspace if you're interested in, using it there. But again, I think this is just a push because AI has to be paid for. And like we talked about off camera, I think Google has more of a urge to charge for it because they don't have all the resources in the back end that Microsoft does to necessarily offset some of the costs. They don't say, look, you want to use AI, sure, we're subsidizing it, but if you want to use it, you want to develop with it, come over here to our Azure cloud and use that. We've got it all nicely integrated for you and everything plays well. Microsoft has a better way of subsidizing what's going on. Google, I think they're at the point of, okay, we see the cost of this, we see what our resources are. Let's start trying to get some kickback for it and put a little cash in the old bank account.
My question is, does being the number one search engine hurt them in this transition? And let me preface this by saying that Microsoft is the number two, but they've also been relatively bad at it. They've kind of been the butt of jokes or whatnot. So people were skeptical when they had Bing Chat. They've done some quick rebranding, called it Copilot, repackaged it, offered it as something slightly different. It's less of a search related experience and more of planning, inquisitive kind of thing. You don't go necessarily to Copilot to say, how old is Natalie Portman? But you do go to Google search, and you've been trained to go to Google search for that. And to your point, the generative portion at the top is additional. Google still has its regular search. So they come back to say, when Google, how is Google going to ask people, hey, do you want to pay $20 for the little portion that happens at the top, or would you like to continue having the lesser experience for free? And I feel like a lot of people are going to say, hey, I've been using this for the last 15 years or so,
Yes.
and it's been just fine, relatively just fine. People are saying they're getting worse experiences in search now because of all the ads and things like that. So maybe that's how they push it. But I do wonder, I'm speaking to you, how do you ask, like, hey, for $20 more, we'll combine our cloud storage if you need it, but you'll get this little bit of search at the top that does way more, but we also still have regular search. That's been the go-to.
I don't think they're selling search, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. I think this is we've all subscribed to these package deals. I think what they will sell you here is the 2 terabyte of cloud storage.
Okay.
And then you get the search on the side. I think there will be some element in these packages that are going to make people think, well, I do, because what do we have here? We have Gmail users, right? Gmail, I think, is default 15 gig, I think, with the free. And they're like, Okay. Yeah, I do need more storage for Gmail. I do need more Google Drive storage. Okay, for 20 bucks, I got a deal here where I get 2 terabytes, and I just happen to get the search results on the side. I don't think anybody or at the consumer level, let me be clear about that, at the consumer level, is ready or even knows necessarily what they're paying for if you go to a consumer, your person walking around your Best Buys and your Walmart, and say, "Do you want to buy something with AI?" I think that you're going to get two answers. What are you talking about? And no, because I don't think consumers are ready to make that purchase. I think right now it will be, as Google is advertising it, a bundle deal. I need Google Workspace. I need the 2 terabytes of storage. I just happen to get this thing called Gemini on the side. Maybe I'll sit down one day and see what this is about. I think we're going back to what we have talked about several times here. Getting people to break traditional text search is going to be very difficult to do.
No, I agree with you, and I'll leave it at that. That was perfect. Period. We're gonna go on our last story, which is the reviews from the Snapdragon X-Elite. And as Paul Thread has put it, it is real. We also had our friend and often contributor, Arif Bagus, who went and they were both at the same event. Apparently, Qualcomm held a little event where they invited a bunch of journalists and reviewers to kind of come and play with their reference devices. Again, we don't have any actual device. I don't say actual, but we don't have any branded OEM devices just yet with these chips. But they wanted to back up the claims that they made, I believe in October, was it, when they first introduced or announced this, about the performance of this thing. They came out of the gate pretty hot and heavy, comparing it to the M2, M3 chips, relegating Intel's comparisons to like the third rail, basically. That they were saying they were so far ahead of Intel that they were aiming for Apple instead. And so a lot of us in the industry had skepticism because our chips have said this for 5 to 7 years so far, and each year it's always been they've gotten incrementally better, but it's nowhere near where they said they were, where it needs to be at, or where we think it needs to be at as an industry. But according to Farad and according to Arif and according to a bunch of other journalists, they are pretty close. They are within striking range this time around. I just wanted to note, some experience that Farad was mentioning about the gaming about it. He's not a guy who references benchmarks necessarily, which is again what the event was basically about. But they did allow some journalists to get their hands on and kind of see some demos where they went through some experiences with DaVinci Resolve, which is big for me, big for anybody who's done content creation, and all the people who always compare their MacBooks to a Windows device, because they, I believe, will be having a ARM-based version of the devices to coincide with whenever this is released. So those of you who are looking to ditch Adobe's version, with ditch, I think, the x86 version, if you're not on a Mac, this could be your landing spot. Any of these new devices coming out. They also played games, which through an emulator, and apparently it worked fairly well. People were getting anywhere between 40 to 60 frames per second at 1080p, medium to low res settings for a lot of these things. They were also saying that the battery life was pretty decent, that the X64 emulation was very good, and it was tailored for this exact experience. And again, these are reference devices, so we can only imagine what these devices will be like once these NPUs are tailored by the OEMs themselves for said experience. I don't want to get into too many details. People can go read their own versions, or go, if people are talking about it in videos, go watch those. I want to get to you, as I mentioned, we've been hearing this for almost a decade, that Windows on ARM will finally be a thing. This is where the industry needs to go. Qualcomm, or anybody else who creates an ARM-based processor needs to keep up. Apple proved that it could be done, so now everything's been compared to that. What are your thoughts on these early reviews?
this is me. This is my jam. This is what I do. This is what I love. And this is what I love the most about our industry is seeing new things, new shifts, and not so much these little spec bumps every year. So one, I can't wait to try a device because I think Qualcomm is really showing off what we can do. Like you said with Paul and our buddy Arif that helps us out on occasion, they were amazed. And what I take from that is, sure, when you get Paul Thurrott amazed over anything, I feel like you've accomplished something. And that's not a knock on Paul. Paul has 3
He's
decades
very
in our
in high
industry.
standards.
Yeah, he has very high standards. He knows his stuff. Um, but these are unoptimized devices, I'm assuming. Software engineers have not had a chance to delve in and fully optimize their software to run on this hardware. So I think we have just cracked the door open. This this is the old, as my grandmother used to say, this is the old wet the whistle a little bit here, get you to want a taste of it. And then when the OEMs start putting out the devices, we start seeing Adobe, hey, this is our version. DaVinci Resolve, this is our version. You know, a game maker, I won't go as far as Call of Duty, maybe it is Call of Duty. You take a game maker that says, okay, here's an optimized version. I feel like, how do I want to say it? The industry will get a little bit of a reboot. We've been doing this Intel AMD thing for decades. We've tried it two different ways. We pushed power, we pushed wattage. Then we have tried the dial it back routine with the U series chips that Intel came out with and have ran with for years. Now this year we're doing kind of an in betweener. You know, some manufacturers are choosing to dial back some power to give you more battery power to make their stuff look efficient. I feel like this is the reboot of a better balance of power versus efficiency. Now, the first devices that come out, they will be just that, folks. I think they'll be first devices. And I think the more iterations of these devices that come and the different form factors that they're going to come in, that's when you're going to start to see things change. Now, is Intel in trouble? Possibly. But I think they will retrofit accordingly. I think they will make the adjustment. AMD will make the adjustment. Now, is this going to be for everybody? No. Just like we had last week, the Surface Pro 10 launched for business. There will be a group out there that says, no, we're going to stick with Intel. Excuse me, we're going to stick with AMD because that's where our software runs. That's what we're developed for. And I think there's going to be a period there where you have to convince consumers, just like with their search engine, that this new Snapdragon is what you need to purchase. Because when you go into your consumer stores, your Best Buys, etc., what are you seeing? The Intel logo, the AMD logo down there by the machine. That's, again, back to our training. That's what we're used to seeing. So I think you're really going to have to convince consumers as well. And you can convince them one of two ways. It's an awesome performer. Look at this battery life. Look at this new form factor maybe that we're able to give you. Maybe this takes folding PCs to that next step. Or you're going to have to convince them in price. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think if you've got two devices sitting on a shelf, and I'm just going to pick two random OEMs, if you've got a Dell and an HP sitting there, and the ARM version is $7.99 and the Intel version is $8.99, you're probably going to get some sales. But if you're going to play the $50 game, people are going to go with the known name until they're shown otherwise. So I think now that you've produced it, you've got to get it out there in a way that people will and can consume it.
Yeah, to that point, I do wonder what the marketing is behind this for a lot of these OEMs. Will they be
Yes.
subtle about this and say, hey, you know what? And again, it's depending on overall performance, but this whole section we've been talking about has been very kind to the performance of this new chip. So do you just say, hey, I am Lenovo. Here's our new ThinkPad. Here's our new Yoga. It happens to be fanless, although these reference devices weren't. They had fans in them, and they were paired with I think it was 16, 36, 8, 16, 30 gigabytes of memory in different variations. Do you just say, hey, you know what? Here's a new version of it. It may or may not have a fan. Its battery lasts twice as long as the other one, and there's no other real difference. Do people just start gravitating to it? Does it speak for itself, kind of like the M1 series did? I don't think Apple did a very great job of saying, "Hey, here's the difference between Intel and our M series." It was just like, "Hey, if you want something that lasts longer, then get this one," because they let the chip speak for itself. The performance, when people ran Adobe, when people ran Excel, when they ran these apps which were optimized for the chip, they performed well. People didn't have to say, "Hey, why is this computer not performing as well when I open up my macros on my Excel on in this dock or whatever?" They never had that question. They always had that question when it came to Windows on ARM. That was one of the biggest issues. Was like, hey, I can't even open the app beyond even the performance of the laptop itself. I go to start it. I've got a brand new computer. I've done all the walkthrough. I've opened the out of the box experience. I'm ready to get going. And you can't, because this thing isn't optimized for this chipset. And that's what Microsoft had to explain. Like, oh well, it's a different chipset, so there's some things you can and can't do on this device. This is why, and that you've already lost the battle. But if this chip is as good as they say it is, and someone goes to start up an app like Chrome, which is now on ARM on Windows, I think it's like half the battle right there for people. They're going to say, hey, you know what? I don't even know what an ARM chip is versus an Intel chip. I just know that this new one that came out, doesn't have a fan, and it lasts longer and does just as well as the one I had before, if not better. And Microsoft and OEMs don't have to say that. At some point, they're just going to start quietly integrating all of those chips into that, and people are just going to start expecting that. And Intel quietly goes away as an option, because unless you are, again, someone who has an app specifically designed for Intel that hasn't been transferred over, you would know that, and you would ask for, hey, do you have the Intel version of that? Because that's the only thing my company works on. But for the rest of us, it's like, hey, I don't care what chip it is, AMD, Intel, Snapdragon, as long as it gets me 10 hours of battery life plus routinely, doesn't overheat, performs like the last one I had, if not better, just give me that one. Give me that one over there, whatever that one is. And I'm hoping, based on these early reports, that's where we're finally at. That's, and then, developers will come along because they want to be part of that ride. Like I said, Google, which is, I think, the bigger side, aside from Paul and Arif and everybody else in the industry saying, hey, we're ready for this, because, again, we're all tech enthusiasts. We're always ready for the next thing. I think Google at least has seen the performance and knew the writing on the wall, like, hey, we need to jump on board because people will be wanting this device, because they've held out, and they've held out for good reasons, cynical reasons as well. Hey, they don't have to be there. They don't want to help Windows necessarily. But if people are going to be changing their new Windows devices for these new chipset version ones, we need to be there. Chrome, like, this is for real. We got to be there. They've gone and done it. So I think that's another indicator of how big this transition will be. I think starting in the summer or whatnot. So I don't want to belabor the point anymore. If you want to put a period on this, I'll give you the last words to this.
I do. I have just a little bit more I'd like to add in. It's right along the same lines of where you are. Remember, Apple did something. Apple had the ability to do something that OEMs can't do right now. Apple took the Intel chips away, and they took them away at the drop of a press conference. When the M1 came out, I think they finished up stock with what they had Intel, and that was it. We haven't heard of an Intel product again. So if you want an Apple product, unless it's the Mac Pro, I believe, you have to get the M series ARM-based chip. Now, it's like you said, it's going to be interesting how this is presented to consumers to get them to buy into the idea. And as you were sitting there talking, I was thinking about something. Um, what do most people do these days, even if it's just 15, 20, 30 seconds a day? Most people are doing TikTok, they're doing YouTube videos, they're doing shorts. And what's the thing that an Apple can do that'll not? I don't know of a PC right now, even as much as we love our friends at Lenovo and some of our other providers that have got some good stuff. I don't know of a PC right now that can sit down and do a full video edit on battery power without having to drag the power adapter around. And you're usually dragging a hefty power adapter around because you've got to have a GPU in your laptop to do decent video editing. So if you kind of reverse the thought and you show that DaVinci Resolve, Adobe run well on these devices, and you can edit for a couple hours and or more, and render your project sitting on the couch at night. Well, now wait a minute. You just got a lot of people to buy that device because I do enough of this myself. If I can pick up a thinning light, sit down on the couch, don't have to worry about a power adapter, USB-C or otherwise, and I can edit for a couple hours, I may consider that. And I think a lot of people will because there's a lot of incomes out there right now that, are based on content creation. And I think that may be where we go with this if it's going to succeed. Because I don't see a lot of people walking into the Best Buys unless you're doing two things. You're creating content or you're buying the computer to go in the kitchen or the dining room or the study room for homework, stuff like that. You know, that I just don't see people stepping away from what they know without a reason to do so. And I think if you can get video editing, content creation out there with some battery life, that will be where you start to get people to buy into this.
Yeah. Like I said, I'll let you put the period on that. I just wanted to mention something tangentially because we brought it up at the very top beginning of this topic. Intel. If the rumors are true and the performances bears out like it is, where does it leave Intel? We do know that they had their investors report, and Intel had to be transparent. They're doing a new way of reporting their businesses, and they lost $7 billion in 2023. Now, $7 billion sounds like a lot to us. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot to Intel as well, but it's nothing to necessarily set the barn on fire about just yet. But there are smoke signals going up. You and I were just discussing off camera about where does this leave them in the wake of that much loss, and if people or OEMs start to choose this Snapdragon Elite chipset over theirs because it affords them better marketing material and the ability to start creating new designs and selling more PCs. That's at the end of the day, that's what they want to do. And when they can say, hey, not only do we have the old Intel ones that you guys are all, comfortable with, know about, and have been in steady decline because, those are relatively good. I'm not going to knock the Intel market because the chips are good. They last 4 to 5 years. Windows has, done a really good job of support to go beyond, 10 years as well. Like there's a reason why PC declined. And I don't think it's part of Intel. I think it's just the fact that PCs have been so well made by everybody. This is kind of an offshoot of that. But now they can start saying, hey, that PC you bought 2 or 3 years ago or during the pandemic that, its battery's kind of suffering because the cells have been recharged so often and it doesn't hold the charge as long. You went from 6 hours to now 4 hours before you have to plug in again. Guess what? We made a new version of that and it gets 15 plus hours. It doesn't have a fan. It's much thinner. It also comes with, and we didn't mention this, but all the NPU stuff, which means you don't necessarily need to drag your attached webcam anymore because you're stuck at 1080p or whatever that webcam had. It provided filters and blur effects and stuff like that. This thing has it all built in. It's right there in Windows. You click on it, you could be up and doing a video conference with isolated sound, a beautiful filtered version of yourself in seconds. This PC has that in addition to Copilot, the Copilot button, which brings up all the kind of stuff that navigates local. Uses a combination of local and server-based things to run your PC. This device does that. Yeah, I know you bought it 2 years ago, but this one does it. So now, do you want to upgrade? Do you shorten that lifespan from 5 years to 3 years because this new thing is so good? And that again will hurt Intel. It hurts, but it does help the OEMs. And so I said all this to say, where do you see Intel if they can't necessarily match that? Because they have the 14 chipset, 14 generation chipset out now. It's good. It runs hot still. And it seems to be Intel's thing. It's very power based. They haven't switched over to the efficiency portion of their roadmap just yet. So what are your thoughts on that? And I'll let you finish the pod with those.
Intel will respond. Now, how they respond and when they respond, I don't know, but I still, in my gut, and my mother always said, son, follow your gut. Intel started us in computing, and that's how far back I take this with the 8088, the 80, then we had the 286, the 386, the 486. For those that are old enough to remember that, and AMD came along at about the 486 mark. I remember having a 486 DX4 100 megahertz AMD machine and just thought I was the cat's meow back then. I think I think Intel has something behind the curtain.
Freudian slip.
Yeah. Thank you. I think Intel has something behind the curtain there that is just, they know about it. They're not in the dark of what Qualcomm is up to. It's not catching them by surprise. They're going to play catch up. But there will be an Intel version of a CPU that comes out and says, look, now we will run with the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite. AMD is going to in turn do the same thing. We have a 3-horse race. Another horse is always good for the consumer. We get better pricing. We have better choices. Intel will be behind for a little while. I think AMD might not be as far behind for a little while because depending on who you talk to, AMD has had the lead on efficiency for the last couple of years. Intel will be second horse for a little while, but I don't think it'll take long for them to draw even with Qualcomm and produce their own. And when Intel comes out and produces it, it may force Qualcomm to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, Intel came out. They're 10% better, 20% better, 15% better, 25% better. Pick a number. Okay, now we've got to do better. And what have we always heard? More people providing for the same thing is often better for the consumer. It's going to take us a little while to get there, but I think that's where we'll end up.
Yeah. With that being said, I just want to note before we close it out that Intel also has their 5 to 10 year plan. I think they started at the beginning of the pandemic or towards the middle of it. The Intel Foundry, that's something that doesn't get highlighted. We're talking about chip for chip performance and competition, but I think they're off ramp essentially if they aren't able to compete in the next 3 to 5 years with the optimistic view that you have is the Intel Foundry, where they will just make in mass chipsets for other people. So to your point, AMD, NVIDIA, things like that, TSMC, even Qualcomm, they will produce these chips at scale and make a small profit off of that to stay alive while they work on, getting their nanometers down and creating that unicorn chip in the future. So to anybody who's, short selling Intel right now, hey, I'm not a day trader. Do what you need to. But to my partner's point, my co-host's point, they will be around for a while, and they have a new business that sort of that they're trying to establish that will keep them afloat. Kind of how Microsoft is pivoting from Windows to Azure to AI, while maintaining Windows as a launch point. Intel will have its own chipset, but it will also do other things. So that being said, we want to thank you guys for joining us for another week. We've chewed your ear off enough. We were going to let you go about your weekend. Where can people find you if they want to talk more about Intel and what could be in the future for them?
I would love to. Like I said, this is my jam. This is where I live. I'm the gamer of the group, but yet on the other hand, I'm the efficiency guy as well. I love seeing efficient, powerful devices. So I'm hanging out at Threads, David PAJ 1978, and I'm also hanging out X, Twitter. Pick your name of the day, David PAJ 1978. Jump over there, say hi. I will be glad to engage anybody in any reasonable discussion about it. Even if you say, hey, I hate what Qualcomm is doing, rejoice Intel. Tell me why. Let's talk about it.
I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but you may also want to start teasing on those platforms. Maybe it's just some pictures and some quick thoughts, because you have got some hardware, my friend. You and our contributor there have got some hardware. Maybe some people want to know what you're playing with, what you're testing, what you would like to test in the future. Maybe show some pictures on there, because we will be having it on our site, I believe, probably next week or the week after. So stay tuned to David and his hardware and his reviews and his wants and desires. Companies, I'm talking to you. If you want to start shipping us new things, you can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter and X. You can find me at Kareem Anderson on Threads. I will also be teasing some things that I believe Arif Bacchus will be teasing on his social media as well. So head to those 2-3 destinations to see if you want to check out what kind of hardware we're playing with, and while we await the Microsoft Surface devices or these new ARM devices, and hopefully we'll get our hands on those, and we'll be in more routine as far as updating. Maybe we're going to carve out a section on this podcast to talk about those things. With that being said, peace.
See you guys later.
Thank you.